All right, man, peace. So you brothers who've been following my channel, whether it be on YouTube or now on Patreon, you'll know that one of my favorite biblical scriptures to cite is Proverbs chapter 27, verse 5, where it states that wrath is cruel and anger is outrageous, but who can stand before envy? In other words, as I've always stated, and as the scriptures itself implies, basically every other manifestation of the human condition is something that a person is willing to acknowledge other than envy. People have a very difficult time divulging their envy and their jealousy because it's an embarrassment to them to acknowledge that they believe that something or someone is better than them, because that's where envy comes from. The belief that another person is better than you, or that they have things that you don't have, that you think you deserve, that they don't deserve, or that that other person is a threat to you in some way, shape, or form, normally because the person who is envious is very dissatisfied with how their life has turned out. So they try to take aim at or make targets out of people who have optimized their potential. Those are normally the sources of envy. Inward dissatisfaction, inward insecurity, and it manifests itself or it projects itself towards those who have done with their gifts what they were supposed to do, that being actualized them. So I wanted to start a series called Who Can Stand Before Envy, and Volume 1 is going to be featuring none other than Mr. Canelo Alvarez, the superstar boxer who's won championships, I believe, in the welterweight division, the super welterweight division, middleweight, super middleweight, and light heavyweight. Now, many of you brothers out there might not be aware of this, but Canelo was recently a victim of a kidnapping within his family. An extortion attempt, well, I shouldn't say attempt because it was successful, in which one of the, I'm presuming, Mexican cartels were able to abduct one of his brothers and demand that Canelo issue them a ransom. Now, Canelo's going to go over the details here, but these are things that are going to start to befall people who are very successful, especially when their success is aligned with fame. That's one of the things that creates the greatest amount of envy in people. It's not even so much sometimes what you can do or what your talents are, even though that often is the case. It's also the things that accompany the utilization of those talents, that being fame or notoriety. So many people want to be famous or think that they do, or at the very least, they want to try to steal some light away from people who they admire. And it's very unfortunate. There's a direct correlation there between being envious and being a fan. Many so-called fans are actually jealous of the person that they're a fan of. They just have not reached that stage of mental ineptitude yet, or the mental psychosis has not transitioned to that level yet. But somewhere in between being a fan and a hater is where that jealousy starts to creep in. And it's a major, major problem. So let's see what they have to say here.
We're going to start with a story that is absolutely devastating. It's every celebrity's worst nightmare. Canelo Alvarez says his brother was abducted by some horrible people in Mexico in 2018.
Once again, I would never understand why anyone would want to be famous. I just don't see the benefit of it. I mean, other than the coochie that you'll get, that's pretty much the only good thing about being famous, is that you get a vast amount of random coochie, just women throwing their vaginas at you. And after a while, even that has to get old, because so many of these females, they have scams that they're running.
And he was forced to negotiate with these people himself in order to secure his brother's safe release from captivity. This is one of the most horrible stories that we've ever had to cover here. And you hear celebrities talk about this all the time, that they feel like they're targeted because people know that they're rich, because people know that they have access to, huge funds like that. And
well, that's a part of that fame dynamic. Canelo, and it might be unfortunate to have to say things like this, but he's going to have to hire shooters. People like Floyd Mayweather, he has people whose job it is to enforce the fact that you must respect Mr. Mayweather. You have to have people around you who are willing to do time and accept, the donations to their commissary and things like that in case shit goes down. But you just cannot allow yourself to be a target. The more famous you become, the more you have to arm yourself and protect yourself, and that's just a fact of life.
And that's exactly what seems to have happened to Canelo Alvarez. Now, he opened up during an interview on In Depth with our friend Graham Benzinger, who's great. We love Graham. And he was talking to Canelo about this. Canelo has never talked publicly about this before. And he kind of walked everyone step by step through what happened. By the way, Babcock, this is important too. All of this went down right before he was about to take on Rocky Fielding in a big fight in New York City. So you have Canelo preparing to step in the ring and fight, and publicly he's got to like sell the fight and he's got business to attend to.
Yeah, Evan, I remember talking to Canelo the week of that Rocky Fielding fight and had no idea that he was going through a personal tragedy at the time.
Now, here's Canelo explaining the situation. This is just devastating to listen to. Watch.
Your brother, right before one of your fights. Okay.
Now, not to digress, I'll rewind it back so that you brothers can listen to the start of the conversation. But just to digress for a moment, if you guys are looking at Canelo's t-shirt, you'll see that he also is within the craft as well. His logo or his emblem, which of course is meant to be a stylized CA for Canelo Alvarez, is also meant to hearken unto the compass and the square. Do you see that? The emblem on his t-shirt, which is his logo for Canelo Alvarez, is also meant to, once again, be likened unto a compass and a square. So he also is venturing through the levels of the craft.
Got kidnapped.
2018, Monday before the fight. En el teléfono, yo negocié negocié todo para que lo soltaran. 3 días negocié.
He said for 3 days I negotiated with those assholes so they would let him go. 3 days. So who knows? Could this be just a ritual that he was placed through? Because we know 3 days is the amount of time that Christ was in the earth. Could this just be a hearkening or an allusion to a death and rebirth ritual for his brother? Who knows? But either way, this is just something I wanted to address because many of you brothers out there are very talented / gifted. And what you'll find, especially as your life starts to advance and the people around you remain in stasis or, just in whatever state they happen to be in, particularly if they don't have ambition or they're not goal oriented, you may start to see the envy and the jealousy manifest itself or emanate towards you. And you might be flummoxed initially, but you have to grasp that the only time that you're going to have snakes in your grass is if you have enough money to have a front lawn and a backyard. When you're broke, you don't have a front lawn and a backyard, so you might not be aware as much of the snakes in the grass.
Que lo soltara. 3 días.
Did you have to involve the police? Or no?
No, never. Because it's even hard in Mexico.
What would it make?
Because maybe they involved in that situation.
Did you feel like that had happened, that the police were involved, or you just weren't?
Yeah, if you
Canelo, of course, very smart young dude. He was wise enough to figure out that if he decided to go to the police, and which was probably the case, they would have a point man in the police department who would drop a dime on Canelo with whoever it was who kidnapped his brother, that he was trying to work with the police to set them up. So he was intelligent enough to just give them what they wanted so that he can get his brother back, because at the end of the day, the amount of money that you're paying to get your brother back is mostly disposable income. You learn from that situation, uproot yourself and your family from that environment, move to a place where you can be safer. And like I said, you're going to have to set apart a certain amount of your revenue to have people who can handle situations like that so that you don't have to get your hands dirty. Because at the end of the day, and it might sound bad, but a lot of people out here are very fucking stupid. And they're real desperate. And when you combine stupidity with desperation, you never know what someone might do, especially when they want to act tough. And please, let me say this. It doesn't make you a bigger man to engage in violence with another person, even in self-defense. Violence is something that we should look at as a last recourse or a last resort, because at the end of the day, 90% of the time, if not higher, when another person is trying to drag you down to a lower level of interaction, it's because of their envy, and they believe that the only way that you guys can connect on any wavelength is at the basest level of human interaction, that being an exchange of violence. So please keep in mind that everything that we do has to be for just in case scenarios. But for someone who's as affluent and has as much notoriety and fame as a Canelo, he has to have people who can handle certain situations like this. He just has to. So hopefully he's going to learn from this situation and have people, just situated just in case anything bad happens in the future. I mean, nowadays you have to have all type of people on the payroll to deal with nonsense, because there are so many elements out here that are unsavory, to say the least.
If you caught that back up, what he's saying is...
let me rewind this all the way back to the start of the conversation.
Your brother, right before one of your fights, got kidnapped.
2018, Monday before the fight. En el teléfono, yo negocié negocié todo para que lo soltaran. 3 días negocié con los para que lo soltaran. 3 días.
Did you have to involve the police? Or no?
No, never. Because it's even hard in Mexico.
What would have been
because maybe they involved in that situation.
Absolutely. And as most brothers most likely know, the Mexican police are even more corrupt than the American police. And it's far easier for the cartels to infiltrate the Mexican police than it would be here in the United States for various gangs or criminal organizations to infiltrate the police or the FBI or the state police or the DEA. Even though, of course, that happens, it's just easier for them to do so down in Mexico because, the vast majority of the people down there look more alike than here in America. So it's easier, and especially with cops getting paid off and on the take. The excellent FX show Snowfall, I believe it was in the middle portion of season 4, showed how there was a corrupt Mexican police official who basically was trying to extort a CIA operative. And I'm not quite sure if he knew who he was dealing with. And of course, things went left for him. But the point was that corruption is a major part of the Mexican police system or the Mexican police force. So Canelo was very wise to understand that he better just give up the money, get his brother back, and then work on making sure that things like that don't happen again down the line. Now, of course, just thinking off the wall, you never know what the hell really could have happened. Could Canelo's brother have been working with the mafia and he was getting it cut Fredo Corleone style, trying to set up his own brother? Who the hell knows?
Did you feel like that had happened, that the police were involved, or you just weren't?
Yeah, if you caught that back up, what he's saying is that he was too afraid that the police were actually involved in the kidnapping, so he didn't want to involve the police in the safe, negotiation to recover his brother, which is
because I'm sure the kidnappers probably said, don't go to police, and if you go to police and they're involved, who knows what happens then?
Yeah, so Canelo thinks, oh my God, if I go to police, the kidnappers are going to know and they're going to harm my brother.
Some of you brothers might remember this story. It was a few years back, maybe like 7 or 8 years ago, where there was an issue involving Mayweather, where there were bulletproof vests and semi-automatic machine guns that were taken out of his house that he actually had gotten from the Las Vegas PD because he was working with them to make sure that he was properly protected. And especially in this day and age, where people are living so much of their lives through social media, the have-nots are more titillated by the haves and what the haves have than ever before. Because when I was a kid, and brothers in my age bracket will know this, when Michael Jordan won a championship, he went away until next season. When Denzel Washington came out with a film, he went away until his next movie. You understand what I'm saying? Like, back in our era, in the 80s and 90s and so on, celebrities gave the masses room to breathe and live in their own existence. Now with Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, one of the ways in which a celebrity is marketed and builds their brand is through social media. So now their quote unquote fans or the masses have a higher level of access to those people than ever before. Literally, people torture themselves by looking at other people's social media and making themselves more and more envious. Literally, their jealousy and their envy grows exponentially every day when they see someone like a Floyd Mayweather with another car on Instagram, or another woman, or another diamond chain. And you never had that years ago. You understand? Even the rappers, like, you know, who wore the big old dookie chains and, you know, the gold chains with the big medallions, they went away. Like, Slick Rick would come out with an album and then he would go away. Now, Slick Rick ended up going away for a long time. His ass got locked up. But you get my point. Like, cats would give their audience room to breathe. There's no room to breathe anymore. So envy is at an all-time high.
So he just said, I'll just do this myself, and basically led the negotiations. Now, everybody knows that Canelo Alvarez was one of the top paid athletes in the world, and he's also like the pride of Mexico. He's a god down there. And for him to say this, that's
part of the problem. He is a god down there. He's a massive idol. And when you allow your image to be cultivated into that of an idol, the people are going to look at you as a god. And when people pray to their God, they expect their prayers to be answered. Right? When people talk to quote unquote God, or whoever their God is to ask their God to grant a request. So, of course, when it comes to someone like a Canelo, if it's a woman, the request that she's going to have is that he engage in sexual intercourse with her and then eventually make her his wife. If it's a male fan, it's going to be not even necessarily that Canelo grant him the powers of boxing that Canelo has, but that at least you will bless me by acknowledging me so that I can think of myself as the same type of man as you. That I can view my masculinity with a bit more pride because, wow, Canelo Alvarez acknowledged me. That's the level of the psychosis that exists due to idolatry and man worship. And these are things that Canelo is going to have to be very aware of. Because the next step is, not only do I want you to acknowledge me, but now I want to be you. And the next phase after that is, not only do I want to be you, but the only way that I can be you is by replacing you. So that's where the extortion comes in. That's where the threats on one's life comes in and things of that sort.
I don't feel safe in Mexico, because he later on in the interview, he explains that he's been spending a lot more time in the United States because he doesn't feel that safe in Mexico for obvious reasons. You know, after you have your brother kidnapped, that's a moving, compelling reason to try to, you know, get away. I will say this before we move on to the next part of the story, though. He ended up reaching a negotiation.
Canelo need to grow the beard back. A man is supposed to have some facial hair on his damn face. I was having a discussion about this with a brother the other day. Shout out to my brother Yawasop. You know, we were having this discussion, and I brought up the fact that, you know, the Most High, he makes a difference in the genders and how they're portrayed physically in almost every animal. Right? The male sheep or the male ram has the horns that curl. The female doesn't have that. They might have slightly protruding horns, but that's if they have horns at all. The male goat has the long protruding horns. The female goat doesn't. The male lion has the mane. The female lion doesn't. The man, the human, has the beard. You're supposed to have some type of facial hair. You don't have to have a full beard, but you shouldn't be clean shaven like a newborn baby. After a while, it looks ridiculous. It looks delusional. It looks like you think that you can still look 18 if you don't have facial hair. And you see plenty of old looking dudes who should have a beard. It actually would make them look younger if they had a beard, because after a certain age, you actually look younger with a beard than without one, because it hides a lot of the cracks and the crevices and the creases in your damn face. The Most High grants a man his beard to beautify him. It's like an ornament on your face. In the same way with the woman, he grants her curves and her hips and her ass and her breasts to beautify her. Right? So men should have their facial hair. Once again, you don't have to have a beard like Freeway from State Property, but at least something. Mustache, goatee, beard, something.
Negotiation with the kidnappers, and his brother was returned unharmed just before the fight. And then he went into the ring and he unloaded on Rocky Fielding. I felt bad for Rocky Fielding because who knew that Canelo had all this going on in the backstory, and Rocky just ended up being the outlet for that.
Yeah, you know, I know a lot of people think there are issues with America, and certainly there are.
Now, of course, just to continue the digression, if you can't grow a beard, then it is what it is. Because I'm sure there's going to be somebody comment, well, brother, what if I can't grow a beard? All I could do is grow a little patch under my nose. Well, then comb that shit out under your nose and keep it moving.
But in Mexico, they have a whole other host of problems, and corruption is a big issue, especially when it comes to law enforcement. So that has to be terrifying. You also have to understand now, if you're Canelo Alvarez, you have even painted a bigger target on your back, and obviously you did what you had to do in getting your brother back, but now you have signaled to anybody out there who might wish to do your family harm that you are willing to pay if somebody was to kidnap a family member. So
that's a great point. But once again, that's the reason why Canelo needs to leave Mexico, and he needs to diversify his employees, if you catch my drift. He needs to make sure that he has some dudes who are on call to handle business if necessary.
So now he's even a bigger target. So, yeah, I don't know how much time Canelo can safely spend.
And he also should be training himself in the use of firearms if he hasn't already.
Spend in Mexico anymore.
It's terrifying. We've been hearing stories like this regarding baseball players and soccer players in different countries throughout the world. And every time my heart breaks for these people, because you just think, you know, you are helpless. And what these horrible kidnappers are making these athletes feel is their life is in your hands. But that's not really true.
Right, but that's really what it's about. It's about the feeling of power, especially when, you know, envious, jealous, low-level people come across someone who they know is gifted. I'm going to force this person to acknowledge that I have power over them. Right? Like, you know, in their view, in their short-sighted view, it's an act of hyper-masculinity. I'm going to show you that that you have to defer to me. But in reality, they're really just portraying their desperation. That's really all it is. But Canelo's just going to have to utilize this as a lesson learned and grow from it and move on.
True. Their life is in the kidnapper's hands. They've made the decision to do this awful thing. Yeah. And it's just an impossible situation. And you feel like one false move and you're going to be responsible for the death of your family member. But, you know, that's a horrible thing to have to think about and to go through. And obviously our thoughts are with Canelo for, you know, fortunately this one ended well for the brother. He was released, but an awful situation. And now you got to wonder, if you're Canelo, every time your sibling or a loved one goes out in public, you have to make sure that they have security, round-the-clock protection, and that you trust the security, that they're loyal to you and they're not going to let anything bad happen. And
that's also another great point. Many Roman emperors were killed by their own imperial guard.
I couldn't imagine living that way.
Maybe they involved in that situation.
Once again, brothers, please make sure that you understand the various components of envy so that you can check it when it starts to manifest itself or show itself within you. Because it really is one of the great forms of weakness. So when we start to spend too much time worrying about someone else and what they're accomplishing as opposed to what we should be accomplishing, when we start to focus on ourselves, we literally don't have time to be concerned about another person and what we believe they owe us, because that's what envy is going into. What a gifted person owes me. You understand? But anyway, peace.